Hello, and welcome back to my channel. Today, we are going to be talking about how to make new friends, especially in your 20s, especially if you just moved, especially if you consider yourself an adult by any capacity, because we don't have college campuses to rely on anymore, and especially if you have social anxiety. So if any of those apply to you, this video will change your life. So the reason that I am qualified to talk on this is because last year, I pretty abruptly moved to New York City to decide to pursue field sales for my company. I felt like New York City was the best place for me to be able to walk on foot into OBGYN offices and sell my product and be able to very quickly iterate and test on the growth channel of field marketing, where I was a field sales rep, aka a medical sales rep. And I have another YouTube video on that specific growth channel and journey if you would like to view that. So the reason that we're pursuing field sales, quick plug about me, is because I'm the founder of Antia Health, which is a company that helps pregnant parents freeze stem cells from their umbilical cords and placenta to use for potential future disease treatment. So I founded it in memory of my younger brother named Andrew, hence the name Antia Health, and he needed cord blood stem cells to treat his cerebral palsy. I went through Y Combinator with this company, entered the startup world and the venture capital world through this company. And so it gave me access to a lot of really amazing communities like YC and Forbes 30 under 30, etc., that have really given me amazing leverage regardless of what city I'm in terms of helping me build community and not feel lonely. Like I kind of feel like I can transplant anywhere and just plug in. So I've had quite a few friends ask me about how to make friends so easily. And although I think I have this advantage through being a part of the startup community, I think there are specific tips that I employed that really helped me make friends. But when I very abruptly moved to New York City, I knew definitely some people in New York already from college and such, but I hadn't actually ever lived in New York. So a lot of my friendships weren't super tight. And I, in general, didn't really feel like I had a solid set in stone community in New York. And so basically for 6 months, I tried really, really hard and thought very strategically about how to make new friends. And within the 7th or 8th month of being in New York, I felt really comfortable. I did have some doubts about if New York was for me because at times I did feel lonely. But when I thought about leaving New York at the 7th or 8th month because of my moments of loneliness, it actually made me feel sad. And I realized that I had worked so hard to build such a strong community, and all of a sudden I was leaving it. So it made me realize that I actually did good work in terms of building myself a little community and making myself feel less lonely in the city. So without further ado, here are my tips. So first, we're going to break down how to meet new people. Then we're going to talk about how to maintain those friendships. I'm going to talk about the different types of friendships that there are, and then some general tips on how to make friends and influence people, or win friends and influence people, as Dale Carnegie says. So first of all, let's talk about how to meet people. So one of my friends recently asked me how I meet new people in a new city, because I tend to kind of transplant myself and then very immediately embed myself in these various communities. So a few of my friends have told me that they think that I'm really good at engaging the communities that I'm in and making new friends really quickly. And I think there are a few key tips to doing this really, really efficiently. So number one, if you work in a certain industry, I would encourage you to try and find a professional community as a part of that industry if you feel passionate at all about what you're doing. So for instance, for me, I'm a founder and I work in the startup scene. And so the concept of tech Twitter is really big for me. Basically, I created a Twitter actually to follow activists in 2020 because I wanted to engage in the social justice conversation that was happening. But then I stumbled upon the fact that there was this whole tech community. I was a UX designer at the time, so I started following UX designers, but then I found founders and investors and people that were tweeting interesting case studies and tips that I wanted to learn more about. And before I knew it, I was realizing that people were also tweeting about events that they were hosting and communities that they were a part of. And I basically applied to every single community that I possibly could, because especially as a solo founder, I never say no to more help and more potential for me to feel less lonely in the startup and founder journey. So if you are in tech and you start following a lot of people that are in your city and your industry, usually maybe about half of them will follow you back. And if you tweet about projects that you're working on, people will follow you. It's really easy to grow on Twitter. And then you can slowly monitor different people that tweet about the events that they're hosting. And a lot of them have newsletters that they put out so that you can consistently get more access to the kinds of events that they are hosting. And once you have a personal following, you can also tweet things like the little pin emoji and say, in blank city, who's around. I've done that maybe once or twice, and I've had a lot of friends do it when I'm traveling with them, and that's really effective. But even if you're not in tech, I would highly recommend Googling around or asking people that you already know if they are a part of any communities that might be interesting and have local IRL meetups in your city. And then you can just start going to those meetups, and then you automatically have a community and something in common with the people that you're meeting up with. So for me, I'm a part of various tech and founder and startup organizations. I think YC is definitely one that gives me a lot of very immediate plugs into a city. Pretty much any city that I'm in, there's some kind of group chat for YC founders that live in that city, and I can usually plug in and find a co-working spot at the very least and people to get lunch with. The Forbes 30 under 30 security community has also provided that for me. And then there are a few other more discreet tech communities that I'm a part of that have channels for cities, typically New York, LA, SF, and maybe a Europe channel or something like that. And usually when I go to a new place, I can just put in the channel, hey, looking for a place to sublease or looking for a co-working spot or what have you. But if you don't necessarily want to be a part of a professional community, what you can also do is ask people in your existing network if they know anyone in your city that you might be friends with, and then basically ask them to set you up on a blind friend date. I did that when I first moved to New York City, and I think it was really helpful for me to just start making friends and get new tips. And even if we didn't necessarily vibe, I at least had a friendly face that I knew I could go to, and they may have told me about some cool place or community or whatever that would make me feel more connected to the city. So another key factor to meeting people is going to places consistently. So for instance, my mom really loves line dancing, and she found this random line dancing group. She made a commitment to attend a line dancing class every week for 2 or 3 months. So then when I arrived in New York City, I thought to myself, okay, I need to commit to going to the same co-working space for at least 3 days a week for a month, because consistency is really how you can make friends. And if you're just going intermittently, people may not be as inclined to approach you, or there may not be as many moments of serendipity where you feel inclined to connect. But if they're all really in a short period, you can kind of bond over shared experience, and especially any recent experiences, and just be able to make friends faster. So I similarly made a commitment to attending a co-working space, and then I found an amazing community of other Y Combinator founders and really felt like I was becoming friends with them, and that was really special. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a co-working space, although I think that is definitely something that can help, because you can very easily find a community of other likely similar professionals. So like WeWorks, or in New York City, I'm a part of an amazing community called Virsi, and they have a co-working space and an awesome set of events that they host at night too. So that's another really special place to meet community, specifically in New York City. But there are other things that you can do too. Like you can look up intramural sports teams, places to take lessons. Like I take piano lessons, and mine are virtual, but if I was really in my making friends era again, I would probably also want to find a consistent spot to practice that I could go to and potentially meet new people. You basically just want to put yourself in situations where you have the potential to meet like-minded people with similar interests to you. Another hot tip of mine to making new friends is to live with roommates. Like in every city that I've lived in, I've pretty much moved in at some point with people that I didn't know that well, and then became friends with them, and then they would invite people over and I would meet their friends, and I would grow my network from there. So whether that's through a Facebook group or a community that you're already a part of, you could just ask around for what kind of housing situation you're looking for, and you can potentially make friends that way. Another hot tip to meeting new people is any event that you go to, try to meet the host, because it's very likely that they host other things and that they know other people that host other things. And hosts are also generally very active attendees to other people's events. So when I first moved to New York City, sometimes I would go to events alone just with the intention of meeting the host. And after I got to know the host a little bit, then I felt like I had done my part to being a social individual and building out my own community. And then slowly I would get recurring invites. And even if the host and I didn't necessarily vibe, I was able to meet their friends that I would vibe with. So meeting hosts is a good way to build out your network, because they're essentially nodes in different social networks, and you can kind of then tap into various social networks. And then lastly, I know it sounds a bit obvious, but I would honestly just Google communities. Like I'm Christian. So when I first moved to New York City, I Googled Christian communities and weekly Bible study groups. And I went to probably 4 different Bible study groups. And some of them were kind of strange, because I literally went straight off of Google and just went to these random meetups. But it helped me realize what I did and didn't like. And if I didn't like something about a certain community, like one of the Bible study meetups that I went to was all really, really, really old people, like above the age of 50. And I asked them if they knew any more youthful Bible study groups. Ultimately, they were able to help me find recommendations. And then also it would just put me in the mindset of this is something that I'm looking for. And I would talk about it with people and they would give me recommendations. I would just search around for communities, even if it's on Google, even if it means giving yourself some weird experiences, at least you're putting yourself out there and you never know what could happen. Okay, next I want to talk about the act of maintaining friendships. So one thing that I realized, especially in New York City, is when you meet someone in New York at an event, there's maybe a 50% chance that you ever see them again, even if it's a recurring event series, or like, for instance, if you see someone at a co-working space, New York City is just so hustle and bustly and everybody's kind of doing their own thing that you may not have that recurring connection, even if you connected well the first time that you met. Like in New York, I remember I would kind of keep a mental note of people that I really vibed with, and then I would just never see them again because they were traveling or whatever, and then I lost out on having a potential friend. So what I started doing is basically treating it like dating. Like if I vibed with someone even a little bit, I would basically ask them to get dinner one-on-one, or I would invite them to something, or like a workout class. I think friend dating is so normal, especially in New York City, and especially if you're new to a city, and especially in your 20s. Like, it's not a weird thing to do. If you feel vibes with someone, just ask them to get dinner. And then if you feel vibes with them again, then just ask them to get dinner again. Like, there are some friends in New York that I have that we've only ever hung out one-on-one and we've only ever gotten dinner, but every time it's been fun. And then eventually we get to a point where they invite me to something or I invite them to something, and then we slowly mesh our networks, and it's really fun. So don't be afraid to develop friend crushes and go on friend dates. Another great way to maintain friendships is to host things yourself. So of course, this kind of depends on your accessibility to venues and things like that, but I think hosting events is probably the easiest way to meet new people, because other people will always want to meet you and you can meet multiple people in a night. But not everyone has the capacity or desire to host all the time. So you could even just get a random group of people together for a little dinner. It doesn't have to be like a crazy party. I've done quite a few dinners of 5 or 6 people that have just met, and they were all just cool people that I thought might vibe with each other. And then I just picked a restaurant and told them all to meet me there. And I think that that was a really good way to meet new people and get closer with the people that I already met. But also, I could ask them to invite someone or what have you, and slowly get to know their friends too. Okay, so I'm going to talk about types of friends to make. So I'm going to read off this section from The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. According to him, there are 3 types of key people based on how they relate to others and influence social networks. So number 1, they're connectors. They're essentially social hubs. These individuals are people who know large numbers of people and are in the habit of making introductions. So this is why I think it's so important to try and meet hosts when you go to events, because they are usually the connectors. And you can also make yourself a connector if you host random little dinner parties, and if you just recurringly ask people to go on friend dates. Number 2 are mavens. Mavens are people who accumulate knowledge and have the social skills to share it. They're information specialists or experts. So I think you can become a maven by going to recurring activities and pursuing hobbies, like how my mom does line dancing and how I do my piano classes, and how I always go to the same gym and I go to the same co-working space. So slowly I've been able to meet other mavens that like to maven in the same things that I like to maven. And then there are salesmen. Malcolm Gladwell says these individuals are persuasive and charismatic. They have the skills to influence others to change their opinions or behaviors. The salesman role is not as applicable when you're trying to make new friends, but it just goes to show that you may as well be confident when you're meeting new people, because salesmen make amazing people to be a part of your network, and confidence attracts positivity. So I also want to touch upon 3 other types of ways to cultivate friendship. This is from the book Social Chemistry by Marissa King. Quick fun fact about me: I love sociology and sociology books. The main genres that I read are memoirs, business books, and sociology books, and most recently I've been trying to get into fiction. So in the Social Chemistry, Marissa King explains that people essentially have social signatures and ways that they like to foster community. One way is an expansionist, people that have large numbers of broad but not necessarily deep connections, people that are usually popular and likable and have a very broad but often shallow social network, and they're often super connectors in a way. I think sometimes I fall into this category because I'm super extroverted and I like meeting a lot of different types of people. I used to always have the thought that meeting new people is like traveling without the airfare. So in general, I just try to stay super curious about the people that I'm with, and I love just connecting with new people. There are also brokers. They nurture weak ties between many different and even disparate spheres. So especially if you're new to a place, I think it's important to get to know brokers, because they usually try to help you meet new people. And I think in some ways I'm like a broker as well, because I really like to host things, because I like when my friends are friends with other people, and I like bringing people together. And then there are conveners, people that focus on a select group of strong ties and work hard to nurture and connect them. And Anna Wintour is often cited as a convener because she keeps a very small, tight social circle with really deep friendships. So all in all, you can kind of use these concepts to decide how you want to approach making friends. I think that's just an interesting way to look at it. But especially if you move to a new city and are just in general trying to make friends, I would just be open-minded. Okay, now to get into general tips. Number 1, say yes to everything, especially in the first 3 to 6 months of trying to make friends or living in a new city. I think for me, with the exception of when I wanted to prioritize work and myself, I would pretty much say yes to everything, because I just wanted to open myself up to opportunity and figure out what nooks and crannies of New York I wanted to be a part of. Have places that you go habitually for a little bit. I think this is really important so that you can start to see recurring friendly faces, and some people may even approach you, so you don't necessarily have to do the work that way. Okay, this is a big one that I think I wish someone told me sooner. Leave an event if you feel lonely. Like, although you should say yes to everything, you don't have to stay just for the sake of making friends. Like, sometimes when I first moved to New York, I would stay at events even if I felt kind of lonely and like I wasn't having a good time, because I just thought like, well, how can I complain about making new friends if I am not trying my hardest? So sometimes I would go to events without a designated buddy because I didn't always have one, but I kind of wish that I knew sooner that it's okay to just leave if you're not having a good time. And in general, then I started learning that I really should bring a buddy, because I'm the type of person where even if an event is not like the most fun thing ever, if I'm there with a buddy and someone that I like hanging out with anyway, then I'll have a good time no matter what. So I started trying to bring buddies to places. Okay, next, make sure to just always approach things with curiosity. If I'm ever feeling socially anxious, this is something that has really helped me. I remove myself from the situation and how the other person might be perceiving me or whatever. I just completely pop that bubble out of my mind, and I just get genuinely really curious. Like, if my goal for the night was to learn about this person and to be able to walk away with a fun fact about them, then I just make that my mission in every conversation that I'm having, to get down to that fun fact and really get to know them. And so I just get really, really curious and ask a lot of questions about the person that I'm talking to. And that's a really good way to get to know someone. I would also try to meet new people, even if you're at a place where you see people that are familiar faces. Always try to make it a slight effort for at least some of an event to get to know new faces as well, so that you're not just refostering old connections. Also, I think if you're on social media, a low-key, really underrated tactic of making new friends is hearting their Instagram story. This concept might age out in the next few years as hearting Instagram stories becomes more normalized, but I think because hearting Instagram stories is such a new feature, I actually think that it's a really great way to get to know someone. Like, if you just meet someone and then you start hearting kind of their random stories that just spark a little bit of joy for you, I think that it will make them feel special. That's my personal theory, because at least like that, I feel special when strangers heart my stories. Okay, quick sociology hack. Longer blinks signify understanding and shorter blinks signify frustration. So if you want to make new friends, a physical cue that you can use is to have longer blinks, and also to mirror the other person's physical body language, and also in general have open body language. So just stand tall and open and be ready to be approached and be welcoming, have welcoming energy. I also try to practice observations when I'm talking to someone and make them complimentary, because I think kindness always attracts other positive energy. So I'll always be like, oh, I love that you do this, or you always do this, and I love that. Like, I love that you're so smiley, or something like that. Like, I try to observe something about them to try and help someone feel seen and more comfortable and safe. And also, if it comes with a compliment, I think that that's an amazing way to make new friends, but not in a Regina George, Mean Girls kind of way where she's like, oh my God, I love your bracelet. Like, make sure it's sincere. All right. Well, I hope that this was helpful. I am now a year into living in New York City, and I feel like I've really gotten my footing. I think the things that really helped me maintain friendships was the friend dating, getting to know hosts, and also having consistent communities. And my consistent communities are things like Versi in New York, which is a really amazing co-working space that also runs events, and also having a really consistent office that I go to with Y Combinator founders so that I can relate to them, and living with people and subleasing from people, or having people sublease from me that were a part of similar communities so that I could just get to know them, and then getting to know my roommates, and also being consistent with follow-ups. Like, if I'm thinking of someone, I'll just text them and be like, hey, we haven't seen each other in so long, like we should hang out, and I actually follow up with a plan. I'm the type of person where if someone says we should get lunch, I will literally text you in the next 48 hours and make a plan to get lunch. I don't like the vibes of when people are like, let's get lunch, and then nothing ever happens. So I don't say that to someone unless I genuinely mean it, and then I will follow up. I always follow up. And if I'm feeling like they're not that interested, I of course won't hound them on it. So it's important to like read the vibes with that. But I just always follow up. I love a good friend date. So yeah, if you've moved to a new city, you will get through this. And remember that everything always changes. If you're in your 20s and feeling kind of lonely, it will get better. Oh, and one last thing, I've never actually tried Bumble BFF, but I've heard amazing things about it and know quite a few people that have met people through Bumble BFF. So I would honestly give it a sincere shot. Try and go on like 3 Bumble BFF dates and just see what happens. I have met my friends' friends from Bumble BFF, and they're amazing and like-minded. And I think that that's a really cool tool. So yeah, thanks for listening.